this was a person who was so rational. It was such a combination of rationality and desire to do something great, something really beneficial to others, and a spiritual desire to mix together. So it was clear that anyway. So she became Didi very shortly after that. So that was a wonderful experience I had of her right from the start. So, and she has so many projects which are going on. I mentioned them in the message or the Facebook in Romania, and she's very well known for her work with education and so on. Is that you got? She got. You should. She got. You should listen. Give less importance to they can arrange the deal later, so they can come in and listen. So yeah. So and she's very well known in the field of humanistic education also. So I'm very happy. Can you come and listen? And as I wrote, just in case any of you didn't see, she's come here specifically especially to help with the development of the Didi strings. And we'll have some meetings there this week. Huh? You can sit. You're welcome. Otherwise, I think you would be the very first person. You'd be exceptional. The first person who gave a talk here standing.
Did you ever feel like you were different when you were growing up? Maybe just like you didn't quite fit in?
I think, I'm so sorry. I think we really have to move it more close.
Not speaking about it. So I was asking, perhaps some of you also felt something in your life, like you're different, like you don't quite fit in to what everybody else seems to be interested in. And, you know, this feeling of being exceptional is not always very comfortable. Yeah, sometimes, I remember growing up and I so much wanted to be the same as the other kids. And I felt different. My family kept moving. So all of the time I was new. All of the time I was trying to fit in. And I didn't quite fit in. And it was a really uncomfortable feeling. Because there's this pressure to conform. I remember at one point my father asked me when I was like 18, 19, and he was saying, so what are you going to do when you grow up and settle down? And I said to him, you know, because he was kind of like, yeah, you like all of these things, but, you know, you're going to become a normal person like me. You're going to get a job and a family and et cetera, et cetera. And I just looked at him and I felt a very clear, strong voice that came from within me. But I didn't even think about it before I said it. And I just said to him, you know, Dad, I don't know what I'm going to do. But what I do know is it's not going to look like anything you've ever seen before. And he was surprised. And I think I was right. This wasn't exactly on my map. It wasn't on his map. It wasn't something that I could have seen coming. And it's more like sometimes you find the path finds you. You just have to be able to recognize it. I want to tell you a Native American story called Jumping Mouse. ignore it and just continue doing his mouse work. And he asked some of the other mice, do you hear that? I hear a rushing sound. And they're like, no, there's no rushing sound. What are you talking about? Just, don't you have enough to do? Like, get busy. You've got a lot to do. And then, after some time, again, he asked somebody else, don't you hear that rushing sound in your ears? He says, something wrong with you? Are you a bit foolish in the head? There's no rushing sound. It's your imagination. And he continued to try and ignore it and to do his mouse work. But he could still hear it. And he just took a decision one day. I'm going to find out what is this rushing sound. And so he started to move towards it. He left the familiar little area that they all lived in. And he went out and he heard new smells, unfamiliar territory. And then suddenly he hears a voice behind him. What are you doing here? And he nearly jumps out of his skin. It's a big raccoon. And Brother Raccoon says, what are you doing here so far away from your mouse family? And he says, very shy, well, I hear a rushing sound in my ears and I know how to investigate it. And he says, oh, the rushing sound. Oh, what you're hearing is the great river. And he gets really excited. It was the first time that someone even admitted that there is a rushing sound and told him what it is. He said, if you want, I can take you there. Yes, please take me there. So he starts following Brother Raccoon through unfamiliar woods, and they finally reach the great river. And it's a wondrous thing. It's rushing, and it's making so much sound, and it's carrying little bits of the world on its surface, and it's shiny. He's never seen anything like this. And he says, okay, I've taken you as far as I can. Now Brother Frog will take care of you. He introduces him to Brother Frog. He's sitting on a lily pad in the middle of the river. And the frog says to him, do you want to know the river? I can show you some magic. I can show you some of the river's medicine. And he said, yes, show me. And so he says, okay, you crouch down as low as you can, and then jump as high as you can. And so, jumping mouse, he crouches down, and then he jumps as high as he can. And when he jumps up, he sees off in the distance the sacred mountains. And then he falls, and suddenly he finds himself falling into the river and getting totally wet and, almost drowning because he's never been in water, so he's trying to, get his head above the water, and he manages just barely to get out of the river. And he's so angry with the frog. He says, what did you do? You tricked me. I almost died. What was that? And Brother Frog says, don't let your anger and your fear cloud your vision. When you jumped, what did you see? And he said, oh, I saw the sacred mountains. He said, you see? I'm not trying to hurt you. And Jumping Mouse now has seen the sacred mountains, something even greater than the rushing river. He said, now you go back to your people. It's easy to go back. He said, how will I find my way? He said, it's easy. You just keep the sound of the river to your back, and you will find your way back home. So when he goes back to the village where all of the other little mice are still doing their mouse work, their noses to the ground, sniffing, they see him soaking wet, and they're terrified. They think, he must have been eaten by some great animal who then spit him out because he was poisonous. So he must be dangerous. If he's dangerous, not even good enough to eat the nurse, then there's really something dangerous about him. And so all of the other mice were afraid of it. Nobody was interested in listening to his story about the great river. They didn't believe him. They thought he was crazy. But from from here, he never quite felt at home again, just doing mouse work. The frog at the river had given him a new name, and when he jumped, he says now he would be known as Jumping Mouse. And that's where he got his name, Jumping Mouse. And from that moment, he had permission. Because even though he went back and tried to do ordinary things, it wasn't enough. He kept remembering the vision of the sacred mountains, and he wanted to go there. So from here begins a much longer story about his journey to the sacred mountains and braving many different obstacles along the way until he gets to the sacred mountains, and it's the vision of the mountains that he has to let go of many of his ordinary ways of seeing and doing things in order to reach it. But it's a long story. So. Anyway, this idea of, that there's some rushing river, I think all of you heard it or you wouldn't be here. Yeah, there's something that you were tuning into that was a bit beyond just the ordinary mouse work. And in that story, they talk about two different visions. The mouse vision is just looking only at what's right in front of it, and then there's eagle vision. The eagle vision that can see the whole world, and somewhere in the middle, like where you're going from mouse vision towards eagle vision, this changing of the vision, to see something bigger. I like how Baba, when he talks about this discourse about exceptions, this is such an incredibly inclusive way of looking at things. Because he's saying there are deviations from the norm, but that is the law of nature. The law of nature isn't just to produce uniformity. The law of nature, in order for evolution to move forward, you get deviations. In genetics, it is the mutations. The cells are supposed to reproduce in a certain way and make, photocopies, but they don't. Every now and then, there's a mutation. And all of evolution depends on those deviations from the norm. Depends on the mutations, because otherwise things stay the same and they cannot adapt. But when there is some deviation or some mutation, that mutation opens up a new branch. And sometimes that mutation allows a better adaptation to nature than what had come before. And in this way, you get all of this incredible variety in nature. So many different niches of nature in the ecosystem get filled because of deviations. So the deviation is part of the law of nature. It's not outside of it. We human beings, though, sometimes we can be very rejecting of deviations. Something doesn't seem normal, it doesn't fit the idea of normal, and we're very rejecting of it. Oh, it's a deviation, it's not normal. Yeah, but here, he's really showing you to value the different, value the deviation, look for its gift. Somehow those deviations are helping to evolve the species. They're not just to be rejected and only the norm is to be accepted. So this also helps us to create a really wide open heart, a really inclusive and generous way of looking at all of nature, of looking at all people, and accepting everything as being within that flow of the cosmic mind. Nothing outside of it, nothing's an accident. And there's these exceptions, which are not. They're not the norm. So if you don't feel normal, it's okay. It's the call of the river that you are tuning into. And many of us might have felt like we didn't fit in to what everybody else was interested in when we were looking for our path in life. That's how I felt. I felt something was missing. I didn't feel it would make me happy to just follow the ordinary path of getting a job or career, whatever. Like my dad was trying to convince me to become a normal person someday. I was like, no, I will never be normal. And in a good way. So this path of the exception, actually Ananda Marga's mission is to integrate into a broken system. But it's to help people to become exceptions that have the courage to see a new way forward and to help forge that path through the unknown. Yeah, it's easy to walk the known path, but it takes courage to open up a new pathway. And this is, Ananda Marga is in some ways building on ancient traditions. Yeah, so we're in some ways walking a very ancient path that isn't necessarily new. We're tuning into, we have behind us thousands of years of yoga practitioners that have opened the path. But to bring this wisdom into a society which has moved into such materialistic directions, no, this is something unknown. This is something new. How to weave in this wisdom into this modern world that seems to be very interested in going the other way, more towards the material, less towards the spiritual. So, we're living in a mouse culture. Yeah, that's dominated by the vision of the mouse. Only thinking for tomorrow. Only thinking about the physical comfort, and how to ensure stability and how to survive and work and family and all of these things. And it's not that these are not necessary. They are. But they're not the full meaning. They're not where the deeper sense of purpose, fulfillment, of satisfaction, and of true, success really comes from. That comes from being able to have the courage to be exceptional. I remember being in India once, and I met this, I think it's the father of Didi, Casey Bala. We'd all been hearing that there was this extraordinary, yogi. Many different armies in the U.S. had been going to India, and they'd been meeting him, and they were getting impressed and coming back with these stories. And I was curious to meet him too. And then one day I came in from a travel, and there were many people, many Didis in the room. I was in the Didi's place in Tiljula, and there was this older gentleman there, and suddenly, as I walked in, it was like people just started to disperse, and I ended up getting the opportunity just to be with him, and he was telling something. He was telling about how, I don't want to be an ordinary man. And he was saying, all day, I'm so busy, I have so much. He was a family person. Actually, he was a Greek Acharya. I didn't know that. In the moment, he didn't even introduce himself. I guessed who he was, just by his vibration and what he was saying. But he was like, I don't want to be an ordinary man. And he said, I'm so busy all day with work and this, so I go to bed early, and I drink a lot of water before I go to sleep. And then it wakes me up. So after a few hours of sleeping, he wakes up because he has to go to the bathroom. And then he wakes up in the middle of the night, goes refreshes himself, and then he sits and he does long silence in the middle of the night. And I was like, wow, that's impressive. Anyway, and I was remembering the story because Dad said, this is when I just met him, he was like, oh, I like to do meditation in the hours before Panchajanya. I was thinking, wow, I like to sleep in the hours before Panchajanya. But I really admire that, and this is something that I really always enjoyed about Ananda Marga, is that it brings together these really exceptional people. I might not always be able to live up to that same standard or example, but it gives me inspiration. Wow, you can do that? Like, that's possible. And then you get curious, and then you might even experiment and see. And like this, it stimulates you to go beyond just the normal limits of what you think is possible when you meet and see these examples. Yeah? And I come to the conclusion, because Ananda Marga also puts it, I first came into Ananda Marga and I'm thinking, wow, I've come into the superhuman race of, yogi, activists, wonderful people changing the world. This is amazing. And then slowly, I got disappointed because I got disappointed. I I discovered there was a lot of normal, like, same kinds of human problems, you know, within a Nanda Varga community, like in other places, and it's like, oh, you know, you feel like it's like you jumped up and saw the sacred mountains and you fell into the river. Like, oh no, what did I get myself into? and actually, what I come to the conclusion is, yeah, Ananda Vargas are human beings. You know, we struggle with the same human problems that everyone struggles with, but what I still find different is that we try. We are trying to be better. We are aiming somewhere high. We might not be there. We still have a lot of defects. We still have a lot of the ordinary problems that you can find, you know, politics, this, that, you know, all these kinds of things that you find everywhere. But there is an effort. There is a desire to do something great. And there's effort in that direction. You know, because sadhana doesn't mean you're perfect. Right? Sadhana is a continuous effort towards perfection. And it's not giving up, you know? So keep moving towards that goal. The goal itself is drawing you and it's making you more perfect. Just the fact that you are trying. Because you don't find a lot of people trying, actually. You know, so for me, that is part of the extraordinariness of this community that, you know, we're all over the world, but there's something that binds us even before I know you have something similar to me. You know, we have come together for some purpose, and that purpose is the same, and that purpose is a high ideal. And Ananda Marga's recipe for becoming extraordinary. Yeah, Baba gives it in a very short form of be great. You know what it is? Be great by your sadhana, service, and sacrifice. Yeah. These three elements bring out the most extraordinary, noble qualities in us human beings. You know, to be great by sadhana, continuous effort. You know, and that means, what else Casey Baba said is, you know, most people, they do their sadhana like routine. And he was saying, no, I don't want to be ordinary. He said, you must approach your sadhana like research. Like you are on a search. And this is true, like to make your sadhana not just ordinary. When you sit to do sadhana, you can just do it kind of like on autopilot, multitasking even. Sadhana's somewhere off there, and meanwhile your mind's trying to do other things. Right? But really, you want to like make your mind one-pointed, you know, to take it away from its habits of multitasking and penetrate deeply, like into that search within. Go deeper and deeper, really try to touch where is the true part of my being. You have to. I read something nice from, not exactly necessarily what you would think of a spiritual teacher, but anyway, Steve Jobs said, you have to be able to hear the signal, you know, and let go of the noise. So there's noise and there's signal. And our signal is the mantra. And everything else is noise. So being able to filter out noise, you know, not pay attention to it, not let it distract you, and just keep your mind focused on that signal and trying to go and really tune into it. So this is sadhana, continuous effort. And then service, you know, to really develop that, to become part of the flow of generosity that is Baba on the planet, you know. He needs vehicles, he needs mediums. Each and every one of you, you're his hands, you're his eyes, you're his ears, you know. And so how can we really be that love? Make ourselves that love. You know, this is through developing that psychology of always kind of seeing what needs to be done and to create that service-mindedness. It's the opposite, again, how our whole society worships individualism, achievement, you know, the self. Yeah, so it is also going against the flow to really try to orient yourselves instead of like, what do I want to who do I want to be? How can I be great? It's what does the world need? How am I needed? How am I being called? What is there that is, what should, what needs to happen? And how can I serve that? And sacrifice, being able to let go of our smallness in order to experience actually the joy. Sacrifice isn't something that should make you feel like a martyr, like, oh, I've done so much for